guys, what's up? My name is Dom. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new to my channel, I typically make bookish content, movie content, and anything else in between because I like to do whatever I want on this channel, and tonight is going to be movie content. For today's video, we are finally going to go over everything I watched in the month of April. There is a lot to talk about, and it's just so funny because back in March, I had so much to talk about. I had to put 2 months worth of stuff into like one video, and it was a hassle, and I remember saying, hopefully, you know, I can film things on time so I don't have to do that again. And now for the month of August, I gotta go over April, May, June, July, 4 whole months of stuff. And I'm like, that is not gonna be one video. So we're doing it individually. So you're watching an April video in August. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first movie I watched is an anime movie called The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. The title is pretty self-explanatory. It is literally about a girl who could leap through time, and she does notice as she does that, she does change events. This is by the guy who created the movie Beau, which I watched last year, and I fairly enjoyed Beau, and I especially like his art style and like the stories he chooses to tell. So I was like, okay, why not, like, let's just watch all his movies. And I believe this is one of the first ones he made that's not like Digimon or whatever, because he worked on a few of those. And I thought it was an okay movie. My thing with this movie is I thought it had a great start and a great ending. The ending actually made me tear up a little. It's the middle of the movie that he was losing me. I thought the pacing in the middle was just very, very choppy. And that's actually the same problem I had with Belle. Great beginning, great ending, that middle, absolutely not. And I was reading, and this is apparently very common with his films, like this is, I guess, just his style. I don't know if it's like a weakness he can't really strengthen or if it's just his style of storytelling. I felt like her character, the main character, wasn't really like fleshed out in the middle. I don't want to say her goals were lost on me because this has the same moral these types of stories tend to have, you know, be careful what you wish for, or you can't repeat the past, etc. One little thing changes the future, etc., etc. But I don't know, something was just missing in order for me to actually like love this movie. Having said that, I did like seeing the different timelines and how like the most minuscule thing changed the future entirely, and my heart really did hurt at the end. I hope this one character I'm thinking of got what he wanted, because you never really find out what he wants, but I hope he got it. But in the end, I gave this movie 3.5 out of 5 stars. So the next movie I watched in April was the Super Mario Brothers movie. This was a lot of fun. The plot of this is that Mario and Luigi are actually Americans living in New York. Business is not booming, and they get isekai'd. This is apparently like if you know what an isekai anime is, this is apparently an isekai. Mario just shows up in the world we know of from the video games. And the most interesting part about this movie is that rather than having to save Princess Peach, he has to save his brother. So I thought that was a really cool twist to the story we all know. But like I said, this movie was a lot of fun. It was a great homage to the original games. I wasn't always like the biggest Mario fan. I'm not like a video game person, but I played enough as a kid to know all the references this movie was making. It was reference galore. If you blink, you will miss something. It's very fast paced, which I thought in its own way was great. I have one gripe with that, but I'll get to that. But the fast pace, like I went into this movie wanting to feel like I was playing a video game, and because of that pacing, I got exactly what I wanted. I felt like I was playing an old-fashioned Mario game. Also, I know it was like a huge thing when Chris Pratt was casted into this, and I do feel sorry for the original voice actor of Mario. However, I have to say, because a lot of people were doubting him, and I'm one of those people. However, having seen the movie, I do have to say he did a really good job considering what they were going for. His voice worked. And I do have some gripes with this, but if you're like a character person, if you love character development, this is not the movie for you. There's very, very little character development. They are all pretty much one-dimensional characters. In my case, I wasn't expecting much going into this, so I wasn't too mad about that. But just heads up to those of you who are. I wasn't really a fan of the music used. Very rarely would they use music from the actual video game. A lot of that was saved for the end credits. However, I was reading about the making of this movie. Apparently the composer actually had a lot of music set up for the movie, but then I think it was Nintendo, because 2 companies worked on this. Obviously Nintendo and Illumination. I think it was Nintendo who had these people replace the composed music with like radio music. So at one point they're on like Rainbow Road and they're playing, no, it's not Rainbow Road, it's Donkey Kong, and they're playing Take On Me. And like that's how you age a movie. So I don't know if this movie's gonna age well musically, but just a heads up for that as well. And like going back to the fast pacing, it's so fast that you will not have time to breathe between scenes. Like this movie is over before you know it, and not to be a YA character, but you are gonna let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. But you know what? I went into this movie not putting too much thought into it. I just wanted a fun video game piece. I got what I wanted. 4 out of 5 stars. The next movie I watched is a movie called Hunger. This movie is actually from Thailand, and it's about a woman who works at her family's restaurant, and then she starts being trained by a very, very famous professional chef. He's like the Gordon Ramsay of Thailand, basically. This movie was kind of a spur of the moment thing. I saw a trailer for it on Twitter. I'm like, that looks really cool. I'm like, wow, it comes out in 2 days. So I decided to watch it. And it was good. I didn't dislike it. I didn't love it, but I did like it a lot. For one thing, this movie ended up going in a direction I didn't expect it to go. I was expecting this to be one of those movies where the main character works themselves to death, but instead there was a different moral. There's a lot of commentary on social class and positions of power that I thought it was important to have. The dialogue surrounding the commentary could be a little on the nose. Granted, that could just be like translations, but I still found it a little too obvious, like, okay, people don't really talk like that. And the sequence of events could be a little too convenient at times, especially near the end there, the way this movie ends. But I still had fun with it. Also, the cinematography of this film, this movie had amazing cinematography when it came to the actual cooking. You know those like really popular TikTok videos where people they make a movie out of themselves cooking? That's what was here, and I just couldn't look away, and I think that really helped what made the movie as fun as I found it to be. So I really like the theme of this movie. There's one quote that I really liked. The quote is, "The poor eat to end their hunger, but when you have more than enough to eat, your hunger doesn't end." That's the main theme of this movie, and I really like that quote. I really like the theme, and then just kind of the moral of the story, is it all worth it? Is that final position in the social ladder that you want so badly worth it when you realize it's changing you into a different person, and a person you don't like? It's not 5 out of 5 stars by any means. I still recommend it though. In the end, I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. So my next movie was a rewatch. I decided to rewatch Disney's Peter Pan that came out in the 50s. There was a live action Peter Pan that came out at the end of April on Disney Plus, so that's why I rewatched this one to prepare for that. Plus it's been years since I've seen this. I used to really like this movie as a kid. As an adult, I'm not a fan. This movie actually made me very uncomfortable as an adult. First of all, it's just not as fun as I remember. I was getting very bored. We could blame the fact I'm no longer the target audience. However, there's still a lot of movies I liked as a kid, like a lot of Disney movies I loved as a kid that I continue to love as an adult. So I don't really know if I can blame the age thing there. I was never a Wendy fan as a kid either, but I dislike her even more as an adult. She is extremely naggy to the point it's annoying. And just going back to how uncomfortable I was watching this movie, just going back to how uncomfortable I was watching this movie, I went into it remembering it could be racist. Again, I haven't seen this movie in years. I think I was like a child the last time I watched this. I know a lot of like old school Disney stuff could be, it could be explicit, but some of it was also subtle. The racism in this is extremely explicit, and I was just very uncomfortable watching the scene with the Native Americans. It's just disappointing when like you just no longer love a movie you loved so much as a kid, but it is what it is. I will say though, Tinkerbell is still a bad bitch. I am obsessed with the fact that if she doesn't get attention, she fucking dies. I think that's hilarious, and I like the sarcastic attitude she has. I know this like the Tinkerbell Pixie Hollow stuff made her nicer from what I remember, but I like the 1950s version of her better. So yeah, Peter Pan, not gonna be watching this again anytime soon. Next, I watched Renfield. This is a modern day take on the story of Renfield and Dracula. If you don't know who Renfield is, he is Dracula's assistant, and throughout this movie, we got to see a cute little origin. But then for the rest of the movie, it does take place in the 2020s. And it's essentially about how Renfield is tired. He doesn't want to work for this evil man anymore. He wants to get out. I didn't know what to make of the trailer. I thought the trailer was kind of like dumb and campy, but like purposely dumb and campy. But when Nicolas Cage showed up as Dracula, I was sold. I could not wait for this movie to come out. So the day it premiered in theaters, I was there. However, it wasn't like the best movie I've ever seen. I was kind of hoping I would give it 5 out of 5 stars. Not because I wasn't expecting like great Oscar-worthy cinema by any means, but I wanted like good campy fun. I kind of got it, kind of did it. So 3.5 out of 5 stars. Awkwafina's in this, and I'm not a stan. I actually can't stand that woman. but she's not obnoxious in this movie, because that's why I don't like her. I find her obnoxious in a lot of her movies, but now that she's no longer pretending to be someone she's not, she's become a lot less obnoxious, and it's bearable. Like, she's actually funny. She got a few chuckles out of me in this movie. This is supposed to be a horror comedy, but I didn't really feel any horror aspects to it unless you're talking about the makeup for Dracula. I think the hair and makeup on Dracula was done very, very well. So that was really cool. But it's just so funny because, like, I truly believe the hair and makeup and costuming for Dracula is Oscar worthy. But then in, like, the next scene, they have the fakest blood you can ever imagine. Doesn't look real at all, but also at the same time, the fake blood is part of the humor. It's part of the campiness. But it's like, how are you gonna have like a not so campy Dracula, like an actual scary looking Dracula with campy blood? Like the contrast was kind of weird, and it took me out of it. And there also is a homage to the original 1931 movie. They do recreate that scene, and I thought that was really nice. I do have a couple gripes with this film. I thought the conflict at the end was resolved a little too easily, which took me out of it, because the movie set Dracula up to be like just all too powerful guy, and that's why Renfield can't do anything. But I thought the way they defeated Dracula was just, it was too simple, too obvious, and it didn't make Dracula out to be like this monster creature like the movie was trying to convince us that he was. And it's like, what do you mean Renfield was scared of that the entire time? And I think the reason I gave this only 3.5 out of 5 stars rather than the full 5 out of 5 was just, I wish this was campier. The trailer made it out to be like super campy. Oftentimes in this movie, I didn't know if it wanted to be campy. Again, going back to makeup and costuming. But then other times it's like, yeah, we are campy because of the blood. So I needed this movie to make up its mind. I needed something better for that ending. I wanted something more complicated. So that's why I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Would I recommend this to people? Yeah, especially if you're like a Dracula fan, because I do think it's interesting we're actually seeing Renfield's point of view now and not Dracula's himself. But fair warning, it's not going to be like Oscar worthy. It's probably not going to be the best Dracula interpretation you've ever seen. Next, I went to the theater a lot in April, Jesus Christ. So next we actually have one of my top 10 films of 2023 so far, and that is Susie. This is from the creator of Your Name and Weathering with You, both movies I absolutely adore. And this is about a girl named Susie who meets this mysterious man. She follows him. By following him, she causes this destruction, and now her and this man have to set things right before catastrophe is unleashed onto the world. And I love this movie. 5 out of 5 stars. This story did not go in the direction I thought it would go, which I actually love. So, because when I watched the trailer, I was like, this is going to be like a 3 out of 5 star movie. Because the story was sold to me as a romance, but it ended up not being that, which I do love, because especially because she's supposed to be a girl in high school, whereas the mysterious man is 27. Also, if you watch the trailer, you're probably very confused, because the guy turns into a chair. So this whole story was sold to me as a romance between a girl and a 27-year-old chair, and I was like, what the fuck? But if you watch the movie, the guy who turns into a chair is just as confused as the rest of us. So, you know, that made the storyline make a lot more sense, and it made me love it. It has one of the most intense openings to a movie I have ever seen. And it's one of those movies where the title card doesn't show up until like minutes later. And it was just so full of action, loud music, lots of amazing voice acting. And just for the title card to show up, and it's like the calmest music you've ever heard in your life. And I remember like I had to take a breather because I was sitting there like this, like at the edge of my seat, clenching my fist. And I was like, this is gonna be a good movie. This deals with a child grieving, which I'm always a sucker for that, and I thought it handled that very well, especially the twist to that. The ending had me and my friend in tears. It is a very emotional movie. And just like the rest of this guy's stuff, visually stunning. Every single frame of this movie could be a wallpaper. And that basically sums up how I feel about Susie. I don't really have any gripes with it like at all. I don't know if I could form an objective opinion. I just love this movie so much. And like I said, it's one of my top 10 favorite films that I've seen so far in 2023. The next movie was a rewatch. Photos from the Wicked movie set were posted on Twitter, and I was like, wow, I'm in my Wicked era, but I can't watch that movie yet. And it's not like I could just go watch the musical, and listening to the musical can only do so much. Let's watch one of my favorite childhood movies, The Wizard of Oz. Y'all, I know this entire movie by heart, the songs, the dialogue, everything. I am still greatly impressed with the makeup and costuming in this movie. It looks better than some movies I see made today. I still want to marry the guy who plays the Tin Man. I think he has a beautiful voice.
Picture me about honey, a above a voice sings low.
Also, fun fact, I don't know if y'all know this, but before Walt Disney completely like destroyed the career of the woman who played Snow White, she makes 2 more vocal appearances. One of them is in It's a Wonderful Life during the bar scene. She's also in this movie. She's the one who says, "Wherefore art thou, Romeo?"
Wherefore art thou, Romeo?
You know what? It's been so long since I watched this movie, like literally years, and it was just such a fun, nostalgic time. Like I was so obsessed with this movie as a kid. I was Dorothy for Halloween for like 2 years in a row. I named my first pet, which was a goldfish, Dorothy. A lot of people were like, "Oh, you named it Dorothy after Elmo's fish." No, named after this woman. And I still want a Cairn Terrier to name Toto. You know what? I actually cried this time around because you know at the end how the Tin Man's like, "Now I know I have a heart because it's breaking," and I was like, oh my god, that destroyed me because I forgot all about that quote until this rewatch. And also noticing like the ironies of the characters, I missed them as a kid, but seeing them as an adult was really cool because you know the Scarecrow doesn't have a brain and yet he's the character that makes all the plans. The Tin Man doesn't have a heart, and yet he's the most emotional character in this whole movie. The Lion doesn't have courage, and yet he's arguably the bravest character in this whole movie. He's always the one that has to jump the gun and go first. Fun fact, some of the drafts of the books were written in Chicago, where I grew up. There's a park in Chicago called Oz Park, and if you go there, there's actually statues of the characters, and it's really cool. It's a really great park. And to this day, in 2023, at 26 years old, I am still asking, where does the red brick road lead to? Next, we went back to the theater. I seriously saw a lot of movies in theaters this month. But the next movie I watched is Beau is Afraid. This movie is about a man who's trying to make it home to his mother's funeral. However, he has severe anxiety. I went into this movie kind of excited. Like I knew it wasn't gonna be horror because by Ari Aster, the guy who did Hereditary and Midsommar. For when it comes to Ari Aster, it wasn't 2 for 2. I thought Hereditary was boring, but I love Midsommar. So for this one, I was like, it's gonna be a tiebreaker. So I went into it like excited, blah, blah, blah. And then I walked out of the theater like, okay, so I just saw Beau is Afraid and Dom is confused. It had one of the weirdest openings to a movie I've ever seen. At first you just hear a baby crying and it's dark, and then you could hear that you're going through a tunnel of sorts, and suddenly you like see a doctor and a crying pregnant woman. And it took me a second to realize, like, oh my god, this is the point of view of a baby going through a birth canal. So that's when I knew the movie was gonna be fucking weird. And actually, I'm always down for a weird movie. Like, I thought the first 5 minutes of Babylon were fucking weird, and now that's one of my top 5 films of the year. And I really enjoyed the first 2 hours of this film. And I was like, you know what, it's gonna be another fun, weird film. It's gonna be another 5 out of 5 like Babylon is, because this movie's also 3 hours long. But unlike Babylon, where I enjoyed all 3 hours, I did not enjoy all 3 hours of this film. First 2 hours, great. Why were they great? I thought they did a really amazing job depicting his anxiety. Scenes and sequences of events were happening like very fast paced, and you don't really have time to breathe between scenes. But that's what anxiety, as someone with anxiety, I can tell you that's what anxiety feels like. This guy went through a lot of worst case scenarios to the point where it's like almost unbelievable. And there's definitely some scenes where I'm like, did that happen or not? So I don't really know what Ari Aster's point was to those scenes or like what he wants you to think. But my interpretation is that some of these scenes are greatly exaggerated, so that way you don't know what is real versus what is fake. Sometimes when it comes to anxiety, like something I often do, I often overthink things to the point I do remember things differently. And sometimes I'll remember something happening it happened a lot worse than what actually happened, which I feel like that's what was happening with Beau. He was remembering things incorrectly at a grander and worse scheme than what probably happened. So that was the first 2 hours. So what is that? That's 4 30-minute increments. So the 5th 30-minute increment, that's when I was getting like a little antsy just because of how long the movie was. The last 30 minutes, not even, actually maybe the last 40 minutes, something happened in the fucking attic scene that they're constantly teasing that just completely took me out of the story. When it showed up, I was audibly like, are you fucking kidding me? There's 2 old guys sitting in front of me, and they looked back and laughed because they were like, same, we're thinking the same. I was in a theater of maybe, I want to say 30 people, and I think we were just all audibly confused. Like, we all just had the same reaction. We're like all this time for that? And that's why I ended up giving this movie such a low rating. I gave it 2.5 out of 5 stars, and I was just so upset. Like, I don't want to say I felt like my time was wasted, because I like those, again, I love the first 2 hours. And I did kind of like the ending, like the last 5 minutes of the movie. It like felt like a judgment day, and that's what solidified my opinion that like maybe not everything is real, but given Beau's anxiety, he's just remembering it to be more intense than it was. But I don't know, man. That like attic scene, I just wasn't a fan. I remember actually like getting pissed off and just felt like I wasted $12. I went to one of Chicago's like oldest theaters that opened in the 20s, had uncomfortable seats. It wasn't cushioned. It was like the old-fashioned wooden seats that like at the slightest move it, someone knew you were trying to eat a piece of candy. All this uncomfort just for that to happen, and it just took me out of the story. I was so upset. So I'm sorry, Ari Aster. I do not like 2 out of 3 of your movies. Dom's not confused. Dom is just upset. Dom is upset. So 2.5 out of 5 stars. Reading those reviews, though, you either love or hate this movie, so watch at your own risk. So the next 8 movies are actually all rewatches. The first rewatch I did was 1989's The Little Mermaid. I rewatched this because of the live action that was coming out, and again, I haven't seen this movie in so long, so I just wanted a refresher. And I had a lot of fun with this rewatch. It had great visuals, great music. Kiss the Girl, my experience with that song is so funny, because obviously, like, as a kid, you know, I loved it. I loved singing along. As a teenager, I was like, oh my god, this is ridiculous. They just met. But, you know, in my mid-20s, I'm like, oh, this is cute. They should totally kiss. Like, I want them to kiss so bad. Such a cute song that fucking Aquafina ruins in the live action. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's for the May video. During this rewatch, I can understand why Ariel fell in love with Eric, despite knowing nothing about him. It's because, you know, she, like, visually watched this guy stay on his burning wooden ship in the middle of the ocean to save his dog. I would fall in love with a man so fast if I witnessed that. Other fun things about this movie, Triton is a dilf. He is hot, but he's a dick. Ariel's a nicer person than I am, because if I had a whole treasure trove like that and my dad destroyed it in a fit of anger, I personally would never forgive him. Like, I would do what she did, especially as a teenager when I would spite my parents for fun. I would do what she did. You could deal with a witch and like run away, but I would probably end up being dead in the process because I'd be too spiteful to go to my parents and, you know, ask for help. Ursula's human form as Vanessa, gorgeous. I forgot about that. I actually forgot about that whole scene and how she has her own song. I will say though, the one thing I was thinking about while watching this movie, because, you know, the whole thing is that she has to be a mermaid or human. It can't be, like, it has to be either or. It can't be both. But if Triton is like this all-powerful demigod, why can't Ariel be both? I guess maybe that like defeats the purpose of like wanting to be part of another world and like becoming her own person. But like, I don't know. You're a demigod, and I've seen movies without these demigod mermaids. They could just walk out of the water and be human form. They jump back into the water and they have fishtails. I don't know, the movie came out in the 80s though, thinking too deep into it. Still love this movie, and I love it so much that the next rewatch was The Little Mermaid 2. I have not watched this film since maybe like elementary school, and this movie is garbage. This movie is so much worse than I remember. So if you don't know what this movie is about, this is about Ariel, who has a child now, and despite being 28 years old, Ariel still looks the same as she did when she was 16. Her and Eric did not age in the slightest. But her child wants to go to the sea. It's the exact opposite of the first movie. Good job. My biggest gripe with this movie is that the plot really hinges on the miscommunication trope, which drives me fucking nuts. Just talk to your kids and they won't disobey you. And not only that, but like the plot isn't really thought through. So her daughter Melody, because of course the singing mermaid has a daughter named Melody, she's not supposed to know about the sea. They don't want her to know about the sea. They don't want her to know about mermaids and all these talking animals. And not only the characters, but like the narration clearly wants you to think that she can't know about all this stuff either. And yet she's talking to Sebastian and Scuttle and understands them. Because in the first movie, when Scuttle's talking, Ariel hears him in English, everyone else just hears birds squawking. But Melody can understand him perfectly, and she can understand Sebastian perfectly. So that part wasn't really thought through. The music sucks, the jokes are so unfunny. The villain is just Ursula's sister, so it's one of those like, because there was something about like the early 2000s straight to DVD sequels where like Disney was obsessed with like this villain's revenge. So the revenge was either by like the ghost of the villain or a sibling. And this person was annoying. Ariel was strangely like Triton, like just as angry, just as miscommunicative. Didn't really like that. That is bad. Like if she spoke to me like that, I would forgive her. You know what I'm saying? Like I went on that whole rant not forgiving Triton, but I would forgive her if she was my parent. Eric is not as charming. He has no personality in this movie other than just like loving Ariel and his daughter. Doesn't really say a lot in this movie at all. I was really confused because at one point Ariel gets her tail back. She goes to visit her cove and it's 100% intact. You know, the cove that her father destroyed and I have not forgiven him for. Who fixed it? Why is it intact? Who did this? The coral reef? I know coral reefs can fix themselves, so maybe everything she had was suddenly out of coral reef. I don't fucking know. And I have the same question from the first movie, like why can't Triton, and like it was weird because this movie like hinted that it could happen and yet they didn't do anything with it, but why can't Triton, this all-powerful demigod, make them like have the ability to be human on land, jump in the water, hey, you're a mermaid now? I don't know. The only thing I liked about this movie was Sebastian. He was the strongest part. Some of his humor fell flat, but he was also just as like sarcastic, and some of his clapbacks were pretty good in this, but other than that, this movie was shit. I decided to have this Little Mermaid marathon in one single day, so, you know, at 11 o'clock at night, I was like, we might as well watch the third one, Ariel's Beginning, which I have not seen since I think it came out. I was expecting it to be shit, considering how much I hated the second one, but this is actually better than the second one. This one I was actually impressed with. Still not good, like I gave it like 2.5 out of 5 stars, but I was more so impressed with this one than the second one because this one at least it felt like someone tried. The second one feels like a quick cash grab and it was written to be a cash grab, whereas like this one, whoever wrote it, like clearly loves Ariel and wanted to expand her lore. The plot of this one takes place way before she ever meets Eric. It's basically Footloose but with mermaids. What's his face? Triton is just mad that his wife died, so he banned music in all of Atlantic City. And Ariel's like, no, I like to sing, I like to dance, and finds like an undercover band. Super cool. Really cute. Loved it as a kid, and it was okay as an adult. Sebastian and Flounder are both pretty funny in this movie. They got a few chuckles out of me, but the sisters actually have a personality in this one, so that was really cool. I did like the villain in this one better than the second one, however, it is just Ursula 3.0. Like she's not related to Ursula. She has nothing to do with Ursula, but it is the same concept. And then two more things. I do wish there was more original music. There wasn't like a lot. This is a jukebox. I would consider this a jukebox musical. And I hate to say this, but Ariel's mom's death took me out. I was weak. I laughed so hard when she fucking died. Oh my god, it should not have been that funny. Like when she got squished by a Beau, I was like, what the fuck? How did that happen? So, okay, don't be friends with me because I'm going to hell and I will be dragging you guys with me. But if I'm to tier rank the Little Mermaids, first one's obviously the best, then this one, and then Little Mermaid 2 is in the ninth circle of hell. That movie is terrible. So that was really fun. I thought April was going to be ending without me watching another movie. However, that live action Peter Pan I was talking about came out, so the last movie I watched in April was Peter Pan and Wendy. And this is a reimagining of Peter Pan that I have extremely mixed feelings on. I actually like Wendy in this adaptation. She's very sassy and it just feels like she has her own agency in this movie. She's smarter, her brothers aren't her whole life. Peter is not her whole life, because I feel like in the original cartoon, like her whole personality was being a believer in Peter Pan. And yes, she's a believer in Peter Pan in this, but she also likes doing other things. She knows what she wants. It's not a bunch of boys telling her what to do. There's a lot of sea shanties in this, which I had fun. I always love a good sea shanty. I like how they handled the Lost Boys in this. Because in the original book and obviously the original cartoon, the Lost Boys are boys in costume. But the Lost Boys in this were actually a mix of boys and girls. I just kind of wish they had those animal costumes from the original cartoon. I thought that would have been cute, but they had different clothes. Honestly, I thought Jude Law stole the show as Captain Hook. There's a lot more depth with Captain Hook's background. I know a lot of people hate that nowadays, like villain origin story, like why do we need to know what they're like? I love a good villain origin story because I want to know the background so I can understand why the villain's doing what they're doing. I don't know, I think it makes a more compelling character, and this was a very compelling Hook. And I liked how they handled his development throughout, just because I kind of was, I don't know why, but I was expecting him to get a redemption arc in this movie. Not that I wanted one. I don't think Captain Hook needs one to be a compelling story. And there were so many opportunities where they opened up for that to happen, and yet Captain Hook, the character, didn't take them. Like he still remained the bad guy we all like love to hate. And I do like how Tiger Lily was handled in this movie. I think she was handled a lot better. She was part of the crew. She had a bigger role in this movie. This movie, she actually does the saving at one point. None of that captured business happens. Now, some dislikes I have. Her brothers, what are their names? John and Michael. They had more personality in the original cartoon that, you know, it's only an hour and like 15 minutes long than they do in this movie that was an hour and 45. They did not have any personality outside of being Wendy's younger brothers. Same thing with the Lost Boys. In the original cartoon and the book, they each have a distinctive personality. In this movie, they did not. You could not tell one character apart from the other personality-wise, so that was really disappointing, again, because it's a longer runtime, so you think they would develop that more, but they chose not to. Tinkerbell wasn't a bitch. That's what I love about her so much in the original cartoon. She was just so nice in this, like part of the gag in the original cartoon is that she was a menace. She would put Wendy through the ringer, but in this one she was always helping, always smiling, and I'm like, girl. And I thought the person who played her couldn't really act. The guy who played Peter Pan, you know, one of the title characters, could not act. He was horrible. And yeah, I mean, it was okay watching it. Like, I've seen worse live actions, but I've also seen a lot better. So in the end, I gave 2.5 out of 5 stars. And then we have the TV shows I watched. So in the month of April, I completed 2 shows that I had started watching in March. The first one is Mandalorian Season 3. You know what? This season gets a lot of flack, but I vibed with it. I vibed with it really well. It wasn't the greatest, but it wasn't anywhere near the worst. I didn't dislike it in the slightest. I still don't understand why so much of the Mandalorian's plot was in a whole other show. I think Disney really shot themselves in the foot with that, because you will absolutely not understand anything that's going on in this season if you don't watch the Book of Boba Fett. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean Grogu is back? What happened with that? So fair warning, please watch the Book of Boba Fett before you watch this season. But I like seeing more of the Mandalore, which sounds like I'm not completing the word, Mando space lore, the Mandalorian lore. I think Din and Bo-Katan should kiss. The season had a really happy ending that pissed a lot of people on Twitter off, because Twitter gets pissed off at everything. I enjoyed the happy ending. I was all up in my field, even if that last frame felt a little Looney Tunes-ish, but I really enjoyed it. I'm glad everyone got what they wanted. And I don't know, like, yeah, I have questions that other people have too. Because a lot of people on Twitter are complaining, like, these questions aren't answered, but this show's getting a season 4. Like, not everything. That's the thing with streaming nowadays. Like, I feel like streaming ruined how we tell stories in a way. Because, like, back in the day, like, if something wasn't answered in season 1, nobody complained because we knew the second season was coming. But now with the way streaming works, we're like, the show could be the best show, like, with the most views, and we still don't know if it's getting another season. So therefore all these writers, like, they like must feel compelled to answer everything in one season, so seasons feel episodic rather than like one story. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense, but like, so many people were just complaining. They're like, what about this, and this? I'm like, we're getting a season 4. That's probably when we're gonna talk about it. So I'm okay with my unanswered question. What else were people complaining about? They're like, oh, the end of this season ruined the endings to past seasons. And I'm like, not really. That's just how story progression works. My thoughts are all over the place, but to keep a long story short and just from rambling, I enjoyed the season. It's not the best one of the show, but I didn't hate it. And then the second and the last one I completed was my rewatch of Avatar: The Last Airbender. If you've been on this channel for a while, you know this is my favorite show of all time. I was going through it in the beginning of the year, which is why I decided to rewatch this. The show is my comfort show. Let me tell you, when that last episode ended, I cried like I never fucking cried before. I was ugly sobbing. If you know me, I'm a baby when it comes to things. I crying to Avatar: The Last Airbender is not new. There are several scenes that have made me cry. It made me cry even more as I get older. But I never I haven't even teared up at the ending before. So that's how I know I was going through it in the beginning of the year. But I sobbed. I was noticing things I've never noticed before. It was during this rewatch that I noticed that when Zuko got his spot back to the next in line to the throne, we always make Azula out to be this person who would try to overthrow him for that. But I noticed during this rewatch, she didn't do it. Like, she was actually okay when Zuko came home and got that spot back. Another thing I found interesting is that she tells Zuko, like, no, I'm looking out for you, dum-dum, but I won't, you know, I'm not going to tell anyone that you're visiting Iroh. And it was during this rewatch I was like, oh my god, she never told anyone. So my view on Zuko and Azula's like sibling relationship has changed a bit. Speaking of Azula, I cried for her like I never cried before. No, I literally, as much as I'm on the Azula deserves a redemption train, I still have never cried before. The last Agni Kai is like my favorite scene in all of animation. Beautiful art, beautiful music, but I still don't cry for her. I watch in horror. It's like, it's just, it hits different watching, even if you are a villain, it just hits so different watching a 14-year-old child have a mental breakdown. But I had a mental breakdown with her. I was sobbing. I was like gasping for air, saying like, I was apologizing to the screen. I was apologizing to the TV. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I know it's bad. I feel so bad for you. I'm so sorry you have to go through this. And I was like, why am I apologizing to Azula? First of all, she's not real. Second, she's a fucking villain. What am I doing? I sobbed at Aang defeating Ozai, which I've never sobbed at before, but that whole fight scene I thought was beautiful, and I'm sitting there like, oh my god. And like I said, that final music, man, that final, what's the one that goes up? Is that crescendo? Just that final blare of music, just this beautiful scene, and you know, like, you just feel like everything's going to be okay. And I'm sitting there ugly crying. I was ugly crying for 5 minutes, and I'm texting all my friends like, I just want to be 12 again, watching the show for the first time. I just want to be as happy as everyone in the show is. But then I got my period 2 days later, so suddenly all these emotions made sense. But that doesn't detract from the fact that this show still hits me a certain way, just like no show ever has since. I don't feel like I've aged out of it. I feel like I understand Iroh even more now and all his life lessons. I cry more for these characters now. All these characters are my children, including Azula. They're all my children. But just know I was going through it in the beginning of the year, and the show really helped me. Like, one of my friends even said, she said she like breathed a sigh of relief when she saw I was watching this. She's like, I don't care that you're rewatching the show for the umpteenth time. I'm just glad you're doing something you enjoy. The show really helps me get out of like the roughest points of my life, and I'm just so glad it's there, and I like kind of want to cry thinking about it. I just love this show so much. Thank you to Bryke for creating it. And on that sappy note, first of all, let's take a thumbnail because I forgot to do that. But that is everything I watched in the month of April. That was a fucking lot. I'm glad I got through this. Let me know down below what you guys were watching in April. If you guys got any new favorite movies, favorite TV shows that you've been seeing. I'm always down for a good recommendation. Let me know your thoughts on any of these movies and TV shows that I've seen. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, comment, subscribe. Y'all know the drill. Without further ado, I'm gonna peace out and I'll see you guys later. Ciao, tutti.